Salams, this is People's Dispatch and you're watching the Daily Roundup, where we look at some of the top news stories from around the world. Here are today's headlines. Latin American leaders Gustavo Petro and Luis Arce addressed the United Nations General Assembly in New York. In the United Kingdom, dock workers launch a 2-week-long strike. A joint investigation has concluded that the killing of journalist Shireen Abu Akleh was deliberate, and anti-government protests are continuing in Moldova. The 77th United Nations General Assembly session began on the 20th of September with speeches by a number of Latin American leaders. The leaders collectively spoke about critical and urgent global issues currently facing the world. These include, of course, climate change, global poverty, inequality, war, among others. They shed light on several regional as well as domestic issues, such as the drugs trade, which has been affecting Latin America for decades and hampering progress in the process. Colombia's newly elected leftist president, Gustavo Petro, while speaking at the UN, noted the utter failure of the US-led war on drugs and, of course, the impact it's had on the region. He highlighted the fact that in spite of the supposed full-fledged war waged against the drug cartels and related organizations, the consumption of drugs has actually increased. He also added that this includes the consumption of much more deadly drugs than cocaine, such as heroin, fentanyl, and others, which has led to thousands of people dying from overdoses. Further, he spoke about the link between the drug trade and climate change, citing it as one example of the fact that thousands of hectares worth of forests in his country have been sprayed with chemicals and burnt down in the past to destroy drug crops, resulting in extensive ecological damage and carbon emissions. Bolivia's President Luis Arce, meanwhile, in his speech, criticized capitalism and faulted it for the multiple problems and crises that the world faces today. He expressed his support for peace agreement to end the war between Russia and Ukraine and called on NATO to stop its expansionist ideas. He additionally urged the UN to work towards ending the Israeli occupation and apartheid of the Palestinian people and called on the US to end its illegal economic blockade against Cuba, both of which have been going on for more than half a century. Dock workers in the major UK port of Liverpool have launched a 2-week-long strike demanding higher, fairer wages and better working conditions. An estimated 560 workers affiliated to the Unite Workers Union began the strike also on the 20th of September. According to reports, 99% of workers voted in favor of industrial action. Reports also indicate that over 400 workers as well as their supporters staged a march at 7 a.m. besides organizing picket lines. Workers have rejected the 8% or 8.3% salary hike that the port company, the Peel Ports Group, has offered. The company had included a £750 one-off payment as an added incentive. However, workers were not happy with this either. They have begun demanding a wage hike which is higher than the rate of inflation in the country, which in the United Kingdom right now is around the 10% mark. Besides the pay issue, workers have for months been demanding other work-related improvements. These include reduction in night shifts, improved job evaluations, and varying pay scales for different jobs as well as different skills. Unite's regional organizer, Steven Gerrard, not to be confused of course with the footballer by the same name, noted that the company management had in 2021 made promises in this regard but has since reneged on those commitments. Gerrard said the management has now delayed making these changes till 2023-24. The dockers' strike was supported by the dock workers and transport unions in Spain, Denmark, Sweden, as well as France. They sent international delegations to Liverpool to take part in the marches and other related actions. Additionally, the International Transport Workers Federation, the ITF, as well as the European Transport Workers Federation, the ETF, expressed full support to the striking workers. In the coming days, more workers in the United Kingdom will be joining the strike as well. As many as 1,900 dock workers in Felixstowe will join the strike on Friday, fighting for similar issues. A joint investigation conducted by the London-based research group Forensic Architecture as well as Palestinian group Al-Haq said on Tuesday that Israeli forces who shot Al Jazeera journalist Shireen Abu Akleh did it deliberately. They called it an extrajudicial killing. The report released on their websites refutes Israeli and US claims made earlier about Akleh's death being accidental by conclusively establishing that at the time of her shooting there was no gunfire and the Israeli sniper who shot at Abu Akleh did so despite knowing her identity. Abu Akleh was assassinated by Israeli forces on the 11th of May this year when she and other journalists were covering a raid at a Jenin refugee camp in the occupied West Bank. Her colleague Ali al-Samudi was also injured in the incident. He later recovered. Israel has refused to take any action against those responsible for the killing, and in an investigation published earlier this month, it claimed that the death was not intentional, but was the result of gunfire or her being caught up in crossfire between Palestinian resistance armed groups and Israeli security forces. Both Israel and the US have accepted claims that the gunfire likely came from IDF positions, but they stopped short of assigning blame to the security forces. They also claimed that this is unintentional and the result of tragic circumstances. The claim was made despite various previous investigations conducted by media groups as well as independent human rights groups, including B'Tselem, refuting the Israeli claims of gunfire at the time of the killing. Forensic Architecture and Al-Haq used advanced spatial technology as well as data and video evidence provided by Al Jazeera to recreate the act or the events of that day. On the day of the release of the report, Abu Akleh's family members moved the International Criminal Court seeking justice. They filed a formal complaint with support of the International Federation of Journalists as well as Palestinian Press Syndicate to establish Israeli accountability. And finally, mass protests continue in Moldova demanding the resignation of pro-EU President Maia Sandu and the government led by the pro-EU Party of Action and Solidarity, the PAS. The right-wing Eurosceptic sections in the opposition led by the SOR party organized a massive mobilization in the capital Chisinau on September 18th. Meanwhile, left-wing opposition in the country comprising of the Communist Party of the Republic of Moldova, the PCRM, as well as the Socialist Party of the Republic of Moldova, have initiated a process towards a vote of no confidence against the PAS-led government headed by Prime Minister Natalia Gavrilica in Parliament on September 15th. The Moldovan left has accused the government of failing to tackle the cost of living crisis, which has impoverished common people across the country. Moldovan politics and society, like many other post-Soviet republics, has become deeply polarized over relations with the European Union as well as Russia. With the onset of the Russia-Ukraine war in Feb 2022, the pro-EU government in the country has been imposing anti-Russian policies, which has irked the pro-Russian sections within the country. The sanctions imposed by the EU as well as the United States on Russian gas imports to Europe triggered inflation in energy and food prices across the country, and Moldova has not been spared from this as well. It's led to an acute cost of living crisis in the country. Earlier this year, communists, socialists and other anti-fascist sections in Moldova protested the Liberal government's decision to ban the St. George's ribbon and other Soviet-era or Russian symbols representing the Great Patriotic War in the country. And that's a wrap for this episode of the Daily Roundup. For more stories such as these, as always, please do head over to our website, peoplesdispatch.org, and don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.